I assume Mitch is dancing through this, even though they can't see him. That is so tight. This is the T-Force LCS Rundown. My name is Mark Norm. This is week 6 of the LCS. And that was a burp that almost came. Speaking of almost coming, we're getting straight into the episode this week.
Okay.
We have so
that
much
was
hype.
awful and made no sense, but I love you for it anyway.
So much
oh my
hype.
god.
We're okay with that
through.
than most of them, so.
Wow.
Yeah. Just
I mean,
start
if you're going to do it
flinging cum
wrong,
around
at least
and
do
we're
it
good.
dirty and wrong, right?
Speaking of dirty and wrong, we have Sifa with us this week. Silent Klaus. We got
Silent Klaus.
Mitch Cereal Box.
I debated just not even saying anything after that.
But he's here anyway. We got Tom Optimus Tom.
See, this is when we have time to prepare for the show and get things set ahead of time. This happens.
Yep. And we didn't even really prepare for anything. I just dropped bombs on you guys left and right. Speaking of the bomb dropping, we got Chris Ringler.
Hello.
I still haven't landed on actually saying what your handle is. So I just make it up from week to week.
That's how it's always been. It's how it's always going to be.
That's all right. So speaking of week to week, this is a lovely week. This is 4th of July weekend still for most. I'm enjoying my last days of vacation. How is everybody's 4th?
I slept through the whole thing.
There you go.
I cast LJL, then went to work for 10 hours, and then went to bed. Boom, 4th of July.
Love it.
I spent it recovering from watching European LCS.
For all the
America.
excitement that it brings.
Yeah, we suck at being Americans, Tom, by the way.
We
Just for the
really
record.
do.
Hey, U.S. Women's FIFA.
Yeah.
There's
Carly
some good
Lloyd
American pride.
beat Japan, and then 2 other players, I guess, scored.
Then they helped. Yeah, if you didn't catch that, some good old-fashioned sports, not just the electronic form. Women's American soccer coming up big, winning against Japan.
All right, now for real sports. Let's talk about
Yeah,
it.
can we? Yeah,
And now for the
what
electronic
show is
sports.
this?
Actual thing that
Which super exciting. We actually get to skip over, I'd say, probably the bulk of what would be the news section. 2 little pieces that we'll talk about more in North America. Of course, those who watched all the North American games would know that Keith was released from Liquid to TSM and played 1 game successfully against TDK. Its success we will discuss when we get there.
Yeah, but before we get there, was he actually released? My understanding was he was just on a trial period with TSM, and if TSM wanted him, they would buy him from Liquid. I thought he was still under
thing I
contract
saw
with Liquid.
Was that he was released. I'm not sure of the logistics of it. We're going to have to see.
Okay. We'll
So,
figure it out. Do
more
some
information for that next week, I'll assume. It is important to note for fantasy owners like Dan that Keith did not play all week. They subbed in Wild Turtle for what was, I guess, supposed to be the better part of the week. Being distracted by lovely Skype chat. I'm going to investigate that in just a moment as soon as the video loads up, which it isn't loading up. So maybe you ought to fix that, Tom. Also, we had some interesting moves from Cloud9. Very unsuccessful. But High comes out of retirement and swaps out for Meteos. More on that later. But let's talk
It's a
about...
high-risk maneuver.
Yeah.
Ha!
Yeah. High stakes considering how low they are.
Sorry, my neck's like jacked up. So if
It's
people
so
are wondering
subtle.
why I keep doing this all show, can't make it crack.
Yeah, we kind of peaked really early on in the episode, and now we're sort of on a downturn.
Well, you
So let's-
started off with the
Well,
climax.
you want to talk about roster swaps for losing teams. So let's take it to the region that matters.
Europe.
That's the only region that matters. European LCS for this week. Lots of movement this week. Not really anything super unpredictable. There were some good games in there, and we'll get into those each. First thing I do want to mention, since I doubt we'll actually have to talk about it anymore after this week, Copenhagen Wolves, with their fully swapped out roster, just as effective as the previous Copenhagen Wolves. Any thoughts before we never talk about them until the end where they get auto-relegated?
I'm a little upset because this is the Copenhagen Wolves team that was a playoff team last split. They didn't perform very well in the playoffs, but they made it over there. And it just kind of seems like there was something from within the organization where they wound up falling apart. And last time this happened, the entire roster became the Ninjas in Pajamas. And we saw how well that went for them. But I don't know, it's a little upsetting to kind of see that, like, the fall from grace of a team that was always kind of mediocre, if not borderline. Why are they in the LCS? And then they have like that one split of like rejuvenation with Freeze coming in and Soren stepping up, and they look so good. And then the fall from grace, and like everybody's gone now. It's like a different roster. There's new players, people that we haven't even heard of, people we can't even pronounce their names. Je suis casse, which apparently means I am cheese. So
well, and for me, it's like, it's not only is it new players. Like, normally when we see new players coming up, they're like coming through the challenger scene, and we get to watch them play, you know, all these games against people of similar skill levels, and like kind of wonder, like, oh, are these guys really going to be, you know, a good LCS team? But this time we get to watch them jump straight into LCS, and we know very quickly, oh no, they're not going to be good. They're boring as hell. Like, there's no building hype. It's like, come in with no expectations, and they came through on that level, at least, right? No expectations. They didn't do anything. It was perfect. So,
well, they didn't go out quietly. Of course, there was a ton of drama over the team. It caused major rifts. And now we're left with the Copenhagen Wolves of today. It's very hard to see SK and Elements, which are the two teams up from them, getting pushed down to that auto-relegation spot. I just don't think Copenhagen Wolves have enough time. I don't think they have the schedule to do it. So it's a little disappointing to see that that's not that contended spot for Europe this
real
split.
Quick. I know that we will talk about Fnatic's win streak. Is there a record for the biggest losing streak yet? Because Wolves are on a 6-game losing streak already.
13 losses in a row by Dragonborns in
Oh,
the opening
God.
split of the LCS.
Sushi.
Spring season 3.
Sushi.
Yeah,
boy.
Velocity are like, thank God we got those wins intermediately placed between our seasons, so we don't hold that record, right?
Yeah, and I think even it may have just been for Europe, but right now, well, I guess TDK broke it, if anything. TDK would have been definitely jockeying for that sole possession for the LCS wide. But that is as good a segue as ever. For some exciting news, really, it's more about next week. Before we hit kind of the middle of the standings, Fnatic has a striking opportunity to capture the longest win streak, not only in the European LCS, but actually the entire LCS period. But they have two very difficult games for them next week with matchups against H2K and Origin. Now, of course, they haven't lost to any of these teams yet, but I would say, I mean, other than the whole pride thing of, you know, just really another notch onto Fnatic's belt. They've already won a world championship in season 1. They've lost all but one split since the LCS started. This would just be, you know, a nice little new thing for their new roster to have under their belt. But it's more important to me for H2K and Origin in getting that leg up in their currently tied at 2 second place at 9-3.
It's also more about, like, so the way that Fnatic tore through the first half of the split, the games weren't even close, even the Origin and the H2K matches. We talked about the dismantling of H2K when they were able to camp Odwamne and shut him down even though he was on Rumble. And we talked about how they were able to get an early game advantage against Origin, and they didn't necessarily fall into the same pattern of random skirmishes that is normally how XPEK's teams normally get back into games from where they're behind. So there's been a bit of an evolution of Fnatic in that they were just crushing even the teams that were supposed to be their closest competition. But as we actually saw when they went up against Giants, for instance, this week, that there's a little bit more fight to these other teams now. And since they're next week, the big hype is they're going to get this, or going to try to get this win streak. And the fact of the matter is they're playing against the two teams that everybody says have the best chance of beating them, and they look way more vulnerable than they've ever looked so far this split. That's where the real hype factor comes in. Because it's not going to just be, oh, we beat one of them, we get the win streak. They beat one of them, they tie the win streak, and then they have to win on the second day to secure it. So it's not like they're going to be walking over like a Copenhagen Wolves or an Elements or a team at the bottom of the standings. If they get this, they're going to be doing it guns a-blazing against the top two teams who do have it's almost like a 60-40, 70-30 shot that those teams could beat.
And they don't have much else to play for this split. Like, I mean, they've all but locked up the 1 seed. I know there's still 3 weeks left. It's still technically up for grabs, but they'd have to have a massive fall. Even if they went 0-2 this coming week, they'd still have to mess up pretty hard to lose that 1st seed going into playoffs.
Yeah, they don't really have anything too challenging in the coming weeks.
Well, I think what was it? Getting qualified for playoffs in week 6. I think is what it was.
That just happened. Week 6 just happened, so they are qualified now.
It was just this week. I couldn't remember what week. Yeah, that's just ridiculous. I think they'll get it though. I think they'll win.
Oh, for sure.
There aren't too much of a roll.
I think you'd be crazy to say even that they would go 0-2 in this upcoming week, let alone not just take the 1st seed altogether.
Yeah, and I think really the big thing about Fnatic especially is I don't necessarily think that Fnatic is slowing down and looking weaker. I think they're a little weaker. Like, I'm willing to say that they're a little weaker, but I also just think that a lot more other teams are more comfortable playing against Fnatic. They're starting to figure them out to a certain degree. Like, you're starting to realize how exactly they're going to win, where exactly jungle pressure is going to be applied, who you have to be careful for. Huni's getting a lot more respect in pick ban, which I think is really important. And but really, like, when you look at these top 3 teams and them all battling it out, like, at the end of the day, this is like its own little mini LCS, right? It's like, unless someone starts dropping games to low-tier teams, a lot of them, cough, cough, Origin, please don't, it's really not going to change. Like, these are going to be our top 3 teams for playoffs, no matter what. I can't imagine any other of the middle-of-the-pack teams making it up to the top. It's just, I mean, H2K, Origin, and Fnatic, I think, are the only teams that have shown consistency, quite frankly. So who's going to win in these matchups? I think that's anyone's gambit. I think it's going to be so exciting to see these teams in the same week go head-to-head against Fnatic, just especially because, I mean, think about Ottawamne versus Huni in the top lane, like 2 of the best top laners. Huni probably the best individually, mechanically, and Ottawamne the best team-fighting top laner in Europe. So it's hype. It's definitely really, really exciting. But as far as, like, the league implications, I don't think there's a whole ton there.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good segue talking about Origin losing to not top teams. We'll dive into, I think, the first game we'll talk about this week very quickly. Origin versus Unicorns of Love. The Unicorns pulling it out.
Hashtag don't ever pick Vayne. God, don't pick Vayne. Don't ever pick Vayne. I was going to try to...
Tifa? It worked out so well last week.
If you ever think it's time to play Vayne, it's not. You're wrong. Let's be clear here.
What if you're Piglet, though? You can play Vayne if you're Piglet.
Unless the enemy team picks Ryze.
You can play Vayne if you're anybody. Yeah. But, I mean, it's just like, yeah. Hanser. Ooh, getting bodied by Hanser. That's a good memory. It's a good little Vayne memory for me. The Vayne pick was really bad. And it's not just the Vayne pick. There was a lot of executional errors, and Hylissang really did show up here in this game, was pretty on point with the Braum. I think that Braum versus Jace, and the consideration that Braum is a counter to Jace and kind of these poke compositions, it's definitely very skill intensive, but it was very clear that Xpeke was not comfortable against the Braum in the same way that later in the week we saw Ryu was, because Ryu was finding a way to hit those empowered shock blasts and finding a way to shut down this Braum pick from Hylissang, whereas Origin just seemed like they hit a brick wall. And a lot of that was also because Origin really didn't have the tools to fight effectively, and part of that is also because, I mean, you look at their picks, Vayne, we have this very, very limited champion. And when she's good, she's god tier, don't get me wrong. She'll 5v1 and she'll win you the game. But those circumstances are so few and far between that it's so hard to pick this, to set up this pick, and more importantly, to execute it as well. The other thing is Lee Sin. So
yeah, I was about to say Lee Sin too. Like, Lee Sin Vayne isn't going to work out for you in the late game really at all. I mean, like, yeah, Vayne will, but Lee Sin just falls off so hard. It doesn't provide nearly as much utility as, like, any of the other top tier junglers, Gragas, Sejuani, or Rek'Sai. Just Lee Sin's just, I feel, so bottom tier. I just really don't think he's good right now.
Banned away.
But yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, there's not a whole ton of junglers I like here, but the fact that they last picked their jungler and the last pick was Lee Sin means it seems like they didn't really know what they wanted. Because when you look at the enemy team, who's Lee Sin going to kick back and how is he going to do it? He's going to kick back Varus. Like, That's the best way to start a fight. Or Corki, right? You get that person. Is that going to happen? No, because they first pick Rek'Sai, who hard counters Lee Sin because he can interrupt Lee Sin Q while he's in mid-flight. I mean, you can do it with a lot of characters in theory, but Rek'Sai is literally, it's super easy. Like, anybody could do it. Same thing, Ryze has a point-and-click snare. Like, you could just stop him from doing anything in your backline. So it feels like the Vayne pick was short-sighted and the Lee Sin pick was just as bad. And, I mean, more than that, in the execution in the game, even when Origin would start to make smart map movements, and force fights that if they had decent picks would have been smart, it seems like they didn't take into account their own weaknesses with the composition that they had assembled.
I just think that when it comes down to looking at the two compositions, both of the teams were kind of going for something similar, which is something, it's just basically kind of been the hot topic of the latest patch right now has been poke compositions, but you throw in a poke composition with a good split pusher, so you can provide multiple points of pressure across the map. And Unicorns of Love in this one, they had Visit Chassis's Ryze that could fulfill the split pushing role. When you look at Origin's lineup, they had technically the best split pusher is probably Niels on Vayne. I'm not exactly confident in Echo's split pushing capabilities. I know he has a decent amount of wave clear with his Q. I know he has some duel potential, but I don't think he's necessarily going to outduel that Ryze because Echo's a mobility champion, and Ryze can shut that down extremely hard, whereas Vayne can kind of be within range of Ryze while he's snaring her, and Vayne will be able to potentially outplay the Ryze using the invisibility of her, on her ultimate. But that factor is you're putting so many resources into the Vayne to be the carry, and then you only have one champion on the side with Jace, which is going to provide the poke, and the Braum Shield's going to shut down one poke champion, and then you had the Corki and the Varus on the opposite side for Unicorns of Love. So they have two poke threats, they have a superior split pushing threat. Their split push threat wasn't the threat that they're hoping to carry them through the team fights either, so it just looked like Unicorns of Love had a little bit better version of Origins comp this game.
So, yeah, and especially with Braum and Alistar, who do very similar things if you're trying to run and force a poke comp. Braum's ult pretty much purely good for disengage, can be used for engage, obviously can block those long-range skill shots as well, so that's incredibly effective. And Alistar, in theory, if you execute perfectly, can do a lot of the same things, but also has the flexibility of being able to go in. But no matter what you do, he's not going to be able to straight-up delete a projectile. And that's incredibly important in a lot of points in the game for them, is the fact that Braum blocks the projectile 100%, because Alistar can't stop the splash damage. Alistar can't stop the fact that Varus' Q is going to hit through multiple targets. And that's pretty relevant if you look at a lot of the fights, how many people that arrow is hitting consistently. So, yeah, I agree 100%. I think it's just a superior poke comp built by Unicorns of Love and some really short-sighted picks on their team. The first three picks, beautiful. Love this team comp. And then immediately downhill for the Vayne and the Lee Sin.
So Unicorns of Love are currently one of the three teams that are sort of in the middle of the pack right now. They're all tied for fifth place at 5 and 7, sharing that spot with Roccat and Gambit, and just falling very shortly behind Giants, who currently sit at 6 and 6. Above them, you obviously have the top three, and below them, you've got Elements at 4 and 8 and SK at 3 and 9. So the playoff position kind of becomes the big question going into the weeks further. Roccat had some pretty good games this week, which I'm sure Tom will be kind of excited about. They were able to beat Gambit on their second day.
They beat SK the first day, lost to Gambit.
Oh, did they lose to Gambit?
Mm-hmm.
I had that wrong. Bum, bum, ba-dum.
So
this is why we don't use the doc. This is why we don't ever look at the doc.
I was actually, so the game against SK was not the best Roccat game, but it did show a Roccat team that was missing last split. So everybody remembers the Roccat from last split, and towards the beginning of this split as well, was, hey, they get some early game advantages, they take it to the late game, or they fall behind early game, they stall, they take it to the late game, and then Woolite gets caught out, and they wind up losing, even though they were about to beat a team like last year, Fnatic, or H2K, or something, a team along those lines. This game was, SK takes advantages, SK controls objectives, SK pushes into their base, and then Rocket's able to slowly claw back. They take some very key fights. They're actually starting to come back, and they have an AD carry that doesn't get caught out, and he stays with the team, and he team fights. And between Rawls and Nukeduck actually showing up to be late game carries for Roccat, they're able to come back through capitalizing on blunders that SK was making in this game.
Yeah, I mean, but let's be honest. Blunders is the key word here when we look at this game. I mean, SK made some pretty massive mistakes. And while you're right, I do think that Nuke Duck did execute. And yes, Mr. Rales, much, much better than Woolite. Woolite was an interesting player.
Just let me have this moment, because it was a terrible strategical game. But from a spectator point of view, it was super exciting because it was a lot of those moments where it was like, oh, SK didn't win. Oh, Roccat won a fight. Oh, Rockat's pushing in.
And see, but the thing is it's so easy to get hyped for those moments when they take it back. But then when you go back and watch it, because when I watched it, I was like, this is such a good game. I'm like, oh, the comeback. And then I go back and watch it. I'm like, how did Roccat even make it this far into the game? They just literally did nothing the first half. So I want to believe in the Roccat hype. I want to believe that Roccat are starting to step up. And I think this team is stronger, but they're still not showing up in the earlier games. And you see that a lot in the rest of the week. That it's, when they can't afford to keep making mistakes, so they can't, wait for their enemies to make a mistake to get a win. They have to take the initiative sometimes.
And I think that goes to both SK games, because SK decided to throw really hard, I think, in both. Well, I personally didn't see all of the Rocket SK game, but losing when you're up 9,000 gold is pretty sad, and have 4 dragons speaks to pretty much exactly what happened in the Giants game too, because they crushed early game. I don't know if you guys were off of that game yet or not.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go ahead and say that the SK games this week were like, man, SK looks really good. This is the SK that we remember. They're taking all these dragons. They got me 37 fantasy points, and they went 0-2 this week.
And then like mid game happened, and you're like, oh shit, there's SK this season again.
SK seems to be plagued by inability to close the game, which has just been something that like lower tier LCS teams have. It's been a thematic plague of the LCS.
Well, just think about like SK and what they've done recently. They've it's so interesting. They, rather than pick up new talent or try to bring in a new AD carry, try to bring in anyone new, they bring in Candy Panda. So it's like, we're not advancing the SK roster, we're going backwards with the SK roster, and it's not a good place to be. And it's starting to show that like we all thought, myself included, that N-Rated was like this god of organization and putting things together, when he was playing with Forgiven, and like they were looking like this really strong team. But now, SK sucks right now, right? And Gambit's not doing so hot either, and neither Forgiven nor N-Rated looks so good on an individual basis. Amazing.
I'm gonna challenge the fact, the Gambit point. I'm going to go ahead and say that Gambit are looking pretty good. They had an easy week this week, though. They played the Copenhagen Wolves, and that was, well, for lack of better words, it was a shit
every
stop.
time we want to talk about Copenhagen Wolves, we should just play that sweet intro song for 30 seconds and then just like stare at the camera and just let our audience know that this is 30 to 40 times more exciting than talking about the Copenhagen Wolves.
And my face on Skype will show how excited it is.
I will have some audio prepared for that next week. Copenhagen Wolves waiting music.
I don't know. Gambit looked a little bit more together. Their early game still looks a little bit shaky, and Diamond Prox doesn't really have a lot of early game pressure. There's actually a graphic that they ran during the LCS where it showed kill participation for the first 15 minutes, which is basically your laning phase, and spots 1 through 9 or 1 through 10 are 9 junglers and Odwamne, and then you go all the way down to 34th. And Diamond Prox is sitting at like a 40-something% kill participation in the early game. And it showed this week, too. Even in the game against Copenhagen Wolves, I think it was, Betsy wound up dying very early on in the lane phase. Soren got a slight advantage. But Gambit, once they kind of crest the lane phase, once they're able to kind of maneuver the outer towers down and maybe either secure or give away the first or second dragon, they have shown that they're kind of like the Gambit from last split, where they might not be the strongest lane phase team, but they have great rotational play, which is a little bit weird to say, especially if your jungler's not applying pressure early game. But they do have really good coordination and really good teamwork. Both of these games, Betsy was playing Jace, and it was probably one of the better Jaces we wound up seeing this week. He had almost 90% kill participation. He only had 2 deaths in 2 games. And even though he fell behind against Soren, he was able to claw himself out of that hole. I think Gambit altogether has kind of found their groove. Because while you might be saying Forgiven's not the same as he was last split. I think it's because he's taken on a different role, and he's not afraid to let his solo lanes kind of carry for him.
Hold on, but here's the thing. I don't think Forgiven doesn't have a choice. The meta does not support AD carries carrying games. It just won't happen because they're not as effective as they used to be. This is not the Lucian Graves snowball the bot lane meta, which was, obviously so good for him because he's so mechanically skilled. But the big issue that I have is Forgiven on this team is that his Sivir's mediocre, right? He's getting better. He's been trying to play it more. He's obviously struggling with that Sivir pick. Why isn't the best early game mechanical AD carry in Europe playing Kalista?
I don't know. He just doesn't play.
It might not be his style. I'm more surprised he's still not just playing Graves.
Okay, but let's look like best AD carry, absurd amounts of early game damage, one of the strongest level 2, probably the strongest level 2 AD carry power spike in the game, guarantees lane dominance if you find the 2v2 lane. He's all about lane dominance. All he wants to play is Graves, Lucian, and Caitlyn, right? That's the meme at this point, is that's all he can play, and he won't play Kalista.
Maybe he's not that good.
I'm going to go out on a limb.
Maybe he's not that good, guys.
I blew all my insightfulness last week.
I'm going to go...
No, you're fine. Like, maybe he doesn't like Kalista, whatever the reason is, though. I think if he wants to play like old Forgiven and have a larger impact on the team, all he has to do is play a decent game of Kalista. My theory is he's bad at it.
My theory is, A, he's bad at Kalista, and B, he's still Forgiven and would rather lane swap. And if you're going to be playing Kalista in a lane swap situation, why are you picking Kalista?
That's fair.
I mean, he does also have Gosu Pepper, a.k.a. Edward, who for some reason every single game likes starting boots ward potions on his supports, which I don't necessarily understand. And they also
I don't know if y'all were here for the time that certain support started with wards instead of more potions, but we don't approve. Take all 4 of your pots.
And a relic shield.
Or any other support item, but get pots.
The weird thing about this is I don't know if it's just Forgiven can't play Kalista, he doesn't want to play Kalista because of the lane slot situation, or Gambit. I mean, Gambit has started banning the Kalista like they did against Rockhat here. I guess they might be respecting that more from Riles than anything. But Gambit is also the team that lets Kalista through and then picks Taric against it and then goes for the 2v2 lane. So Gambit's a little bit weird right now because they are picking, this all the metagame junglers and the mid laners and the top laners, and then the bottom lane is just like, well, that's Gambit's bot lane. I guess it's like the curse of Genja. Like, there's always going to be a very weird bot lane on Gambit.
Well,
I feel like you might be right.
Let's look at the long-term win condition for Gambit. What are they even looking to get out of this split? You've got to be in the top 6 to qualify for playoffs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that means they need to create some separation between them and Rockhat and the Unicorns of Love, and they've got to take down Giants because that's the only way that they're going to make their way up. But once they get to that tournament, I mean, are you seeing them as a better best of 3 team than a one-on-one? Because to me, for a lot of these middle tier teams, I mean, other than, not getting put into relegation, it doesn't seem like Europe has much to fight for.
I would disagree. I think Europe has a decent amount to fight for, but because of the way, looking at it right now, the team who has the most to fight for is Unicorns of Love. Because Unicorns of Love took 2nd place last split and therefore have the 2nd most points for going towards Worlds. If you're SK, if you're Gambit, you need to get top 3 in playoffs if you want to have a better spot in that regional qualifier. If you're Rockhat, you need to place extremely high in playoffs to beat out SK and Gambit and the teams that have points from before. If you're H2K, all you have to really do is make the semifinals and you're in the gauntlet. I think they might actually be secured in the gauntlet just if they make playoffs based off of the points. But you want to get the best seed possible to play the least amount of games, so you want to get at least 3rd place if you're H2K. Origin, they want to win so they can auto-qualify, but at the very least want to get 2nd place so that they don't have to play extra games in the gauntlet style thing. So looking at Europe right now as a whole, the teams that are struggling right now, it looks like they don't have a lot to play for because they're not doing so well right now. But if they were to make it to playoffs, they have the most to play for because they need it in order to qualify for Worlds. The other teams, H2K, Fnatic, they're pretty much safe. H2K, like I said, they get third place. They're pretty much locked for Worlds unless somehow Origin beats Fnatic in the finals. So,
yeah, I think Gambit's actually got a pretty good chance because right now in that, I guess there's really a top 6 because Wolves and Gambit are tied for that 5th slot, which would put them into the gauntlet. Pretty much SK and Wolves are gonna fall if everything goes to seed right now. So they'll probably at least make gauntlet. It's just how far they go in playoffs will kind of determine where they end up. Same thing with Unicorns. They're going to make the gauntlet, but yeah, you can, as Tom said, you can benefit a little bit from playing a few less games.
Definitely was not a part of this at all, and I apologize. There was a massive spider on my desk that I now have trapped that I was just completely and absolutely distracted by.
Elise buffs confirmed.
Damn it, I was about to say that. So just, so we kind of covered the top. We've covered the middle. Elements in SK Gaming. I mean, we touched upon SK a little bit, but are you guys seeing anything out of Elements that's going to make them not head down to possible promotional tournament?
No, I don't think so. Like, the weird thing about Elements is, in Elements, the things have always been like, oh, we need to, we think we can make scaling champions work. Oh, we think that we could play the game our way. Oh, we think we could do that. And then, maybe a week or two ago, when they actually got a win and they didn't pick scaling champions, they're like, oh, hey, we've reworked things, and, maybe we'll only pick one scaling champion, and then we'll have stuff happen. And then other teams are just like, man, they're going to put, tabs on Corki, and that's their non-scaling champion, and Froggen's still going to be playing, Vladimir or Azir or only late-game scaling champions, or Master Yi for some reason.
God. That's, all right. Yeah, I don't think there's any hope for Elements. I feel like they've just now figured out that they need to put Froggen on a late-game scaling champion, and will start to do so. But
No. I think they've only been putting Froggen on late-game scaling champions, have forced Tabs to play early-game champions like Corki, camp the crap out of Tabs, and then they don't do anything.
Yeah, Mott was asking if they're going to be in the promotion tournament. And
yeah.
Honestly, yeah, they are.
Well, not phrasing the question like that, phrasing it like, is there any chance that they get out? I mean, they do have all of the hardest teams, I guess, if you want to put them in that tier. At least 2 of them out of the way, with having games against H2K and Origin this week. Massive kick to the groin. But they got Copenhagen Wolves next week. Should be easy. And then they have Fnatic, which makes them lose. And then they're just going to lose.
Well, no,
and that's in week 8. They have Unicorns next week, and they have Rocket next week. So
that's
teams that are
big one.
Teams that are better than them.
They need to beat Unicorns if they want a chance, because they need that 1-1 tie.
Yeah,
they need to start getting as many 1-1 tiebreakers as possible, at least. But then they've got the 1-0 over Gambit already, which is big. 1-0 over Rocket, which is big. So they could potentially 2-0 one of those teams and win a tiebreaker, jump them kind of at the very last second, and potentially get to the 7th place spot, and it'll be Elements 2 seasons in a row at 7th.
Yeah, and those would be the most important games for them too, because not only that, but if they own one of those head-to-heads, it could be the difference between them tying with somebody for 6th place and winning, and tying with them for 6th place and playing a decider to see who gets to playoffs and who doesn't.
I can't decide who I want to see in relegation more between Elements, SK, and Unicorns of Love.
To be honest, though, I don't
Elements.
Thank goodness you didn't mention the one team I was hoping you didn't mention.
Rocket?
Yes. Someone believes.
To be honest, though, I don't really think we're going to see too much movement in Europe this split. Even though there's some really big names on the challenger teams, like Wicked's on one. There's many more. I just can't conjure them to mind right now. None of them have been looking super great. There's only one team right now that's 4-0, Dignitas Europe.
Wait.
But of course...
Oh my gosh, I just thought of something. What if Unicorns of Love gets relegated, but still has enough points to make it into Worlds qualifying? Qualifies for Worlds.
You have to be an LCS team.
I believe the rules are that you have to be in LCS contentions. You can't finish below 7th. I'm not 100% certain, but I think I remember checking this for Cloud9 on the website.
Okay, because that would be actually, yeah, Cloud9 would be the same thing. But I'm gonna look that up while we're talking about it. But that would be amazing if they
fine.
win Worlds and they're not in LCS.
Speaking of amazing, let's hop the ocean and
No.
Amazing's on Origin. Don't get your amazing out of here.
I did
Find
amazing.
another adjective.
Did amazing hop and ocean.
No, I want one more thing. Yes, he did.
Thank you.
But I want to talk about
allow
real
it.
quickly. If you guys have been hearing about Runeglaive Ezreal, I know we kind of brushed this game a little bit.
Oh yeah, whoops, my bad.
SK versus Giants, and Giants played this twice this week. Twice played Runeglaive Ezreal on Pepinero, and it's really an interesting game to watch because Giants plays a super late game kind of comp, despite having Urgot, which is kind of dumb if you think about a late game scaling comp. Urgot doesn't really come to mind, but they play what's essentially a triple tier team, which of course takes a while to scale up. They got Ryze, they got Runeglaive Ezreal, which might as well be a tier, and Urgot, and even holy crap, oh my god, the former support for Elements, and I can't think of his name.
Promise Q?
Mitch.
Crap.
Crepo, holy crap! I swear,
I
I
thought
swear
you were
I
just
saw
talking to
LCS
yourself
before.
for a second there.
No,
I thought I was wrong. I just said Crepo to troll, but you're
Yeah,
actually.
you're right.
Nailed it.
Crepo's talking in the stream about this, about how they're going to take forever for anything to work, and like we saw the same thing with SK. I just wanted to point out, if you guys want to like figure out the new meta that might be coming in besides Jace, because Jace was in this game against them. Runeglaive Ezreal, watch the Giants SK game. It's actually pretty good despite being another throw, because this week was just full of throws.
You want to
Honestly,
understand why Pepinero receives the most gold in the EU LCS as a mid laner, and also does the most damage of any mid laner in the EU LCS. Watch this game, and you'll start to see.
If you
Honestly, you can do it with the Giants versus Fnatic game too, because Giants almost came back in that game off the back of Pepinero and his Runeglaive Ezreal play.
Yeah. To be fair, it was Frederick who pretty much won that SK game. He stole a Baron. He didn't ex-Peke them, but he was by himself against three
But at the end
members.
of the day, I really think that Giants. Part of the reason Giants have been so successful is that Pepinero is just like. I mean, he's got a limited champion pool, but what he does play, he plays well and consistently the center of attention on that team.
Yeah, love them.
Do you guys like the Runeglaive Ezreal?
I don't.
I think it's broken.
No,
I
Not
think
yet.
it's. We saw a really good counter to it. Well, when you're building your whole team around Runeglaive Ezreal, and then you build a team that can do nothing but get in and kill somebody, a la Gravity. You can see how, if that's sort of what you're banking on to carry your team, that can very quickly fall apart.
I like Runeglaive Ezreal because it's bringing back mid lane assassins, because that's the way you beat it.
Yeah.
Only
Anything
reason
to
I
bring
like it.
Zed back. Anything if they buff Zed, if they're like, yeah, we went too far, gotta remove that Zed nerf so that we can bring back Zed.
Cloud9 play Zed this week?
They did.
We can talk about NA.
Ooh.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's
He
talk
didn't ult
about
for real,
North
though.
America. Before we do talk about North America, though, I did forget in my stupid pigeon brain to mention that the network, the lovely Trinity Force Podcast Network, had quite the time this past week. We were featured on the community creations section of the Riot website. On the forums, Adam did an interview with one of the guys on the community team about the network, and it was primarily about the proper, but it did include some information about the rest of the network at large. Obviously, just tremendous to see the support hitting that high of a tier for the network and everything we're doing. Of course, it's not just the LCS rundown. Of course, it's not just the T-Force proper. You've got so many podcasts out there that we're producing, so many other kinds of content, I guess, that you could say that we're producing now. We're really trying to bring back Sheen Procs. Mitch has his show about champions that he does, which is a special promotion. It's just, there's so much going on in the network right now that if you're just focusing in on a small set of shows, I would encourage you to expand your mindset and check out the rest of what the network has to offer. And the best way to do that, of course, is going to trinityforcepodcast.com or our subreddit, which is r/T-Force Podcast or T-Force Network. T-Force Network, not that one. Yeah, so let's talk about North America and let's open up because I actually want to spend as little amount of time on the whole TSM debacle as possible. We'll start off with TSM versus TDK, then move into Gravity because I think Gravity is much more interesting, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
So do we want to start off with TSM or do we want to start off with TDK? Because I got stuff to say about TDK.
Let's
I
start.
got stuff to say about Gravity, so
Let's
yeah,
just avoid TDK to piss off Tom for this entire.
Because
Tom gets
last
to talk
week,
all episode, and those are the rules, Mitch. We
Because-
have to
Oh, I'm my bad.
When I
I'm
wanted to
muting
talk-
my mic right now.
when I wanted to talk about TDK fucking last episode, and you guys exploded about how we shouldn't be talking about bottom teams, blah, blah, blah. Now they're all of a sudden not super relevant, but a little enough to pique Tom's interest.
So
Let's talk
hold on.
about
Hold
TSM and Keith. I'm
your
gonna
song
put the
button?
brakes on you. I'm gonna put you in the. I'm putting baby in the corner, and we're just gonna talk about the TSM Keith pick. So, as we alluded in the beginning of the episode, Tom's in the corner now. As we alluded to in the beginning of the episode in the news section, TSM did temporarily, however they acquired him, acquire Keith to play in place of Wild Turtle on very much what appears to be a trial basis. They put him in for the TDK game, which I assume they all thought was going to be a stomp. What impressed me out of TDK, and we can segue in just a moment, so Tom, get your guns ready. What impressed me about TDK is they instantly knew how to attack TSM. Let's go after Keith. Let's go after their new blood. Let's mess that up and put them on tilt, and then hopefully that can take us through the rest of the game. What ended up happening that game was you had the most explosive Runeglade Ezreal on Bjergsen that you could imagine. You had an equally explosive Ninja on playing Victor, and you had so many jukes, it wasn't even funny. And basically the game came down to who can kill the other AP carry and then win the game. And TSM won. Talk about TDK, Tom.
Well, it's almost like the strategy of just tilt them hasn't been done a zillion times before. And it's almost like when you need to upgrade a weak link on a team that isn't even that weak and replace it with somebody who is pretty good.
Come on.
Then you kind of get into the situation where like the rest of the team, aka Bjergsen, kind of just poops on you. Like, so this game game.
Good, continue.
I was gonna say I don't want to take away too much from TDK because TDK obviously showed that they have marked improvement with their entire roster. I do, however, think that TSM hasn't been playing like TSM for the past couple of weeks has been playing. And with a new player in the mix, they were vulnerable to some attacking of the new lane, the new bottom lane specifically in this case. So TDK was really good at capitalizing on what TSM's weaknesses were in this part, but they didn't have the Bjergsen factor handled. That was pretty much this game.
Yeah, I mean, Ninja definitely went toe-to-toe with Bjergsen more than a few times. It was a back and forth in the beginning. But the thing with TSM was that there was no choice for anybody in the team not to keep Bjergsen alive. Keith was very much ineffective. His positive scoreline only came out towards the end of the game when kills started coming in because TSM and Bjergsen was just too far ahead. Dyrus isn't going to do anything on Nautilus. Santorin's not going to do anything on a very tanky built Gragas. And of course, Lustboy is a support. He's not made for damage either.
Well,
so
that's kind of the way that Runeglaive Ezreal comps work, though. You have Runeglaive Ezreal is your main late game damage carry, very similar to late game AP hyper carry Kog'Maw, and then you have a supplemental damage threat in your AD carry who you provide some sort of utility. In this case, Sivir presses the R button. The rest of the team is tanky, utility, and protects those two carries. That's what TSM did. TDK camped Keith early on, and they shut down the secondary carry to this composition, but the secondary carry in this composition also provided utility. The problem with Runeglaive Ezreal is it takes a long time to scale up. It needs 2 items, and it needs a decent amount of farm. So about 20 to 25 minutes is when Runeglaive Ezreal actually starts doing things.
And it was certainly doing things. I mean, Bjergsen could nearly one-shot just about anybody on TDK. But the whole game, if you're a diehard TSM fan like Bridget and I are, you are sitting on the edge of your seat as soon as the team fight starts, because you know if just Bjergsen dies, that's it. The team fight's over. They're going to get just walked over at that point. And then kind of towards the end of the game, because this was not the shortest game in the world, it pretty much came down to whichever team managed to kill the other AP carry. That was going to be it.
Well, and the other thing, too, is that, I mean, when we look at the difference between AP Ezreal or Runeglaive Ezreal and Victor mid, it's that Victor's so strong in the mid game because he gets so much AP from that Hex Core plus the Death Cap, like just an absurd, more than any other character in the game, and just can do so much damage just with the upgraded Death Laser. And so he's like this definitive mid game team fighting kind of carry. But when he's not paired with Sivir, he really struggles to be effective because he can't really set up efficiently.
Right.
Like, he has to have people come into him, and there's no reason for Bjergsen ever to walk into Victor's range once you hit mid to late game. And so, to a certain degree, I feel like Team Solo Mid outdrafted here, but also TDK really in the mid game needed to capitalize, needed to find bigger advantages, and they couldn't. And I think that to a certain degree, that's TSM exploiting the fact that it's a younger, kind of newer team. Because when you're a more established team, you know how to force advantages, you know how to force these things. But when you have a new team with new communication, it's really difficult to push out on and to make things happen effectively. And at the same time, I think for TSM too, they had to be willing to lose this game. They had to just assume, like, we're playing Keith, we'll see what happens.
I think it's the other way around. I think they didn't assume much out of TDK at all, which a lot of people got pretty hyped up about the TDK win. The TDK almost win over TSM, because it could have gone either way. And just a very brief segue. Then you had the matchup against Enemy, which was basically Emperor on his own, awesome. Ninja on his own, also pretty good. Can we put the two together to win team fights? No, let's let Enemy just do whatever the fuck they want.
I loved this game because after the TSM game, there was a lot of praise on Twitter for TDK, and even people rallying under the banner of TDK, top 3 North America team, 1-10 record, to which I very quickly jumped the gun and said, if that's the case, because TDK pushed TSM, then Giants should be a top 3 EU team because they push Fnatic. And droves of very adamant TDK supporters in this case came out and called me a wide variety of names, including sassy and bias, and saying that I was just trying to rustle some jimmies.
You are a sass.
Lack of better
the rest
way.
of them I don't agree with, but you are a sass. That's... You can't start various offensive names with sass.
That's okay. So I'll concede to the sassy point. However, when looking at the standings, Giants is a top 4 EU team. So that's not exactly an understatement to say that by Giants pushing Fnatic that it was a testament to how strong Giants is. Where in the case of TDK, I said I was not convinced that TDK looked like a top 3 North America LCS team with their full roster, which they had been practicing with for a decent amount of time. Mm-hmm. And I said that I would concede the point when later on they played CLG, Liquid, and Gravity, to which many people said, you are just being a hater. So when the Enemy game came around...
You need evidence to formulate an opinion, Tom? You're a hater. I'm sorry.
When this Enemy game came around, I had all the evidence I needed to sit back with my iced tea in my chair on my 4th of July weekend and just be like, top kick, and sit back, sipping my iced tea.
Still, you cannot take it away from TDK that Emperor's got moves and that Ninja's a pretty decent ADC. That Enemy game, literally every time Enemy got an advantage, they Emperor and Ninja 2 different parts of the map, and it would be that all of a sudden Emperor gets jumped on, he goes down or he has to back, Ninja would show up and clean up, or vice versa. But when it was an even match at the very least, they did so well. And I think if they just were just a little bit more coordinated and a little bit more ready, they could have done a lot more.
Sure, but individual players, a top team, do not make. Team play, a top team.
I mean, I'm not gonna say they're a top team. It's just not.
Speaking of a top team.
Yeah, let's talk about Gravity. The number one.
Okay, all right.
Another team that people said that I was delusional about when I said at the beginning of the season I expect them to be a top 4 team. And now they are tied for first place. Top kick.
So, let's talk about Gravity, because Dan's ready to just jump off his chair right now.
I have like a question I want to ask to cap off the Gravity discussion, but I want to see what people's initial thoughts are before I ask it.
Well, let's hop into the first game, TSM versus Gravity. So basically, TSM, it was actually their second game of the week, but do you guys really want to talk about CLG?
No.
Chris, do you just want to get really depressed?
Let's just not talk about it, guys. It's too soon still.
Yeah.
It's playoffs, man.
We'll ignore the CLG Gravity game because it was basically Gravity housing CLG, and CLG just being CLG. Like, this shouldn't come as a surprise to CLG fans. They hit a pinnacle, they hit their golden age, and then they immediately fall into chaos. We're living in the chaos, and we're quite happy.
Gravity TSM. That's way more fun to talk
TSM
about.
Pretty much, with the exception of a couple of different picks, they're still kind of going for the same idea. The AP Ezreal. They put Dyrus on Gnar, I think he's a little bit better on. And we have Wild Turtle this time on Corki. It's a little bit more pokey. You got Lust Boy on Annie. Got a focus stun. Then you have the fuck you, we're just going to come at you build of Maokai, Shen, Sivir, Jarvan, and Nidalee. All of which...
And support Shen.
I think that they didn't necessarily say, fuck you, we're going at you. They went at their turrets and rotated the map so quick that by the time I realized what had happened, Gravity was up 12 turrets and there's only 11 to take on the map.
The problem is that nothing from TSM can penetrate that. They literally did nothing this whole game.
Well, here's the thing. More than anything, I agree that they did nothing. They were they had a team where it's early game, Corki's the only one who does damage. Late game, Ezreal's the only one who does damage, and we've got some pretty good team fight pieces with Gnar, Gragas, and Annie. But
theoretically, they had none of that.
Yeah, that never happened, and part of that is because how the hell are you going to execute that team fight well against a Shen who, the second any of you are grouped up, can lock you down. So you have to burn one of your CCs just to stop the Shen from doing anything, just to stop the Maokai from doing anything. The J4 similarly does pretty well, and honestly, Gravity built a comp specifically to exploit, I feel like, TSM's reliance on Bjergsen in the mid to late game, and also just to kind of exploit Wild Turtle's pretty weak champion pool. Wild Turtle pretty much only plays Sivir well, right? At least in my opinion. He's had some pretty good games on other champions too. And I feel like Gravity outmaneuvered them. Their shot calling was clearly better. Props to Bunny Fufu, who came out of nowhere and is now apparently a shot calling god, because that game was super clean. That didn't look like Gravity versus TSM. That looked like Gravity versus Dragon Knights or Gravity versus Enemy. That was an amazing game. And but Gravity deserve a lot of praise for it.
Yeah, this week they land tied for first place with TSM. That matchup is 1-1 for the season, so that's huge for them. Really, what it's going to come down to is these next couple of weeks and what they're going to be matched up against. Their schedules are pretty similar. I think TSM has the worst of it, to be honest, but Gravity still has to play Cloud9, Enemy, Dig, Teammate, Tip, and TDK. So Teammate, TDK, Cloud9, maybe even Enemy to some degree, those should be pretty easy wins. I'm only thinking that really Dig and Tip are going to give them any kind of problem. maybe not even Dig. I mean, Tip's been really hot like they were last split. Towards the end of this split now, they're really starting to come together. So maybe there's something there. But TSM have, in terms of difficult teams, Liquid, Tip, and Dig. Also having Enemy, Cloud9, and TDK, or T8, rather. So it's going to be tough. I think these are going to be the top two teams either way. This is a finals preview. This is what we're looking at.
I can kind of get behind that. I think Gravity has definitely shown marked improvement overall, and TSM has shown that they are kind of going through like another TSM growing pain, which is, I don't know if it's exactly centered around just their AD carry pickup. I don't know if it's necessarily centered around the way that the game is evolving at this point and how poke compositions are kind of the go-to, where TSM normally likes to play 40-plus minute games where poke comps necessarily aren't exactly all the rage. Poke comps kind of want to get early advantages. They want to take early towers. They want to group up earlier. TSM has kind of been playing for the more dragon-focused game, which doesn't necessarily seem to be the go-to strategy right now.
On the subject of TSM, I will say that, like, when you think about what TSM's good at, they're the North American team fighting team, right? They're the team that is good at team fighting, good at forcing fights, good at making fights happen, good at executing in fights and communicating in fights, whether it's target priority, whether it's, synchronizing cooldown usage, whatever they do, they're good at it, right? They're good at executing team fights. And the poke meta that's being built as a response to Sivir being so popular, and once you ban away Sivir, like, all the normal hard engage options are actually much, much worse because the ways you team fight are much more limited. This new poke meta doesn't favor TSM. I mean, what their most recent strategies have been: hop in the Bjergsen backpack and hope to God we make it to 30 minutes, is what it's looked like to me, at least. And obviously it's working okay. But I also will say...
It doesn't help that now they have a big question mark where the AD carry position should be. I mean, are they going to run Wild Turtle? Or are they going to run Keith? They saw a good performance from Wild Turtle last week. Not really 100% great from Keith this week, although they did produce probably one of the best post-game interviews I've ever heard, because Freak yelled at Keith for talking to Liquid as they came in, just as they started the interview, but didn't follow it up with like, just kidding. He was like, you shouldn't be doing that. That's a really bad way to start out your first LCS interview. So you didn't do so great this game. How do you feel about that? I should have grabbed that audio.
So, but the thing I will say, I like TSM as far as management goes, awesome. I mean, the fact that they're covering their bases by picking up a new player, but not immediately committing with that new player, and are willing to take that risk and understand that it's for the better of the team. I mean, this is the only team in NA that's like really successfully roster swapped, incrementally, right? Because we've seen CLG, it's never worked ever, so let's never talk about them again. And Dig obviously wiped their whole roster and brought something back, and they're doing okay. Yeah. But like, I mean, one thing about it, like, one player has been swapped at a time for TSM for so long,
pretty much,
and they've remained a top North American team through all of that, which is pretty impressive.
And it's because of that fact that I think this is a really bad spot for TSM to be in right now, because it's not like they made the decisive decision of, okay, we're taking Keith now, and we can fully let Keith into our wing, and we can make this happen. It is a question. It's who deserves it more, who's going to earn it. And the new changes have kind of allowed for that to happen, so that they can have multiple people on a roster. They can switch people out as they please. They have plenty of time to do it in two different people in the same week. I just don't think it's going to benefit TSM in the long run. Not at this point right now. Long run, I should say, yes, it will. They'll find the right person. But the end of the split and Worlds, maybe not.
Okay, so here's my question with regards to Gravity and what was formerly a bottom team, now becoming a top team. Is Gravity really that good, or is NA dropping in terms of skill level?
No, I think they're that good, actually. One of my friends is actually basically had his money on them the whole time. And if you watch all their streams too, you can see actually how skilled they are too. Keen's just... I really like Keen, is mostly what I think a lot of it comes on to, is that his mid picks are really, like in this, they really worked out because the Jarvan just countered Ezreal to where Ezreal couldn't really do anything even from afar. So I just think they're kind of... I don't want to say they're the North American unicorns to love because that doesn't work out at all, but they know when the weird picks work out. Like the mid Urgot, the mid Jarvan, they know how to throw the curveball in when it really matters. And then they also know how to play standard too. So versus unicorns to love doesn't. So that's kind of my opinion. I think they're actually pretty good, but I also do think North America is slipping at the same time. So it's kind of this weird better teams are falling, other teams are getting better. And more teams are reaching their peak versus I think TSM's peak is kind of already happened. I think they're getting a little bit worse. Not to say that they're bad by any means. I agree with Siva saying they're the best team fighting team, but they're not really. I don't know. They seem to be kind of fading out slightly right now, and that could just be the Wild Turtle key thing. But that's just I don't know. That's my view of it.
I think. Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say I to the point of North America getting a little bit worse. I don't necessarily think that's 100% wrong. But at the same time, I mean, if you took a look at what was strong about North America before, where you had pretty much TSM and Cloud9 kind of carrying the banner, the only thing that's different now, I'd say TSM's pretty much still the same. Like they have big opportunities to throw, they make huge mistakes, and then they rebound off those mistakes. That's classic TSM. That's what any TSM has to deal with, is watching stuff like MSI happen, but then have them come back even stronger than before. The only thing that's really different is Cloud9 and how terrible they are now. And it's not like, oh, we changed the roster and now the Cloud9 brand is different. It's mostly the same people, too many of the same people for it to be not good anymore. And it's just, it really seems like the whole region is a little bit worse, but I think it's just because we don't have as diverse of a player base getting better. And that's the vacuum that Gravity kind of got sucked up into. Cloud9 goes down, other teams have to go up. I still kind of liked Link, even though a lot of people didn't. So CLG made some changes that I think made them worse. Liquid is weird and Liquid, so they're kind of a little bit further below than I think they normally would have been. Somebody had to take those spots. It's going to be Gravity.
I think, speaking to Gravity, I think they've coupled two things together extremely well. One is, normally in North America, you look out and you grab talent from outside of North America, whether it be from Europe or it be from Asia. And while Gravity has done that with Move and to some extent Keen, even though Keen has been here for a while now at this point in the Challenger circuit, they also capitalized on picking up or evolving the talent of some of the younger NA prospects that have worked out best for them. That's Altec, Bunny Fufu, and even to some degree Haunter. These are guys that floated around Challenger, floated around maybe one or two LCS teams, never really got their groove, where Herald is being really, really good, like especially in Altec's case, or completely underrated like Bunny Fufu and Haunter's case. They put them on a team where they have decisions in the shot calling, where they're able to mesh with the guys that are their carries, and they work together extremely well. I also think that individually they have some very skilled players that a lot of people in North America tend to underrate. Keen kind of being like the one that I really want to highlight, because looking at Gravity, they have a 100% red side win rate, which is unheard of because blue side OP. A lot of that comes from the fact that when you pick red side, or when you're on red side, you have the last pick. And almost all of their games, the last pick is given to Keen, which means that they are saying Keen is going to counterpick your mid laner, and we are going to move around the map, pivoting around Keen and his lane dominance. And that's what Gravity does super, super well. I think they play to their strengths. They have really good talent that they were able to scout at and acquire either very early on or evolve to the point that they're good at now, like acquiring Altec and pairing him with Bunny Fufu. And I just think that they've blossomed, and they haven't been pinpointed in the spotlight. So there hasn't been like the harsh criticism from Reddit. There hasn't been a lot of big feedback on their style, because they've kind of flown under the radar and grown themselves.
It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think that their shot calling is insanely good. I think that they've been relatively consistent. I think Keen, obviously, I like Keen a lot more than Power of Evil. I feel like Power of Evil's innovations are smarter and more long lasting, but I think Keen executes better, if that makes sense. So Power of Evil can be the first guy to bust out Kog'Maw or Varus, but at the end of the day, I don't think he's the best mechanical player. Whereas Keen will bust out something that literally makes zero sense in the meta, except in that one given situation, but he executes flawlessly, right?
Yeah.
You know, like the Jarvan mid, like the Hecarim, you know, like you have to be. He punishes teams with mediocre mid laners so well, which is part of the reason why I think that the team does so good is because, quite frankly, there's like what, 3, maybe 4 good mid laners, and the rest of the team's mid laners are like so. And they're obviously doing really well. I think it's well deserved. I'm just not sure if it means that America is, or NA, sorry, not America, NA is getting better, or if it's like.
That kind of becomes the next big question. So ultimate win condition for Gravity this split is obviously that they win it and get the auto ticket to Worlds. What's their performance going to be like there? Do you think that there's any smithering of a chance that they're going to be able to move up?
The weird thing to me is because they have a really deep champion pool and a lot of different people, they think it suits them well for a best of X series setup. And because they do so well on red side, I think it also sets them up extremely well. But the fact of the matter is, they've only been tested in one best of X series, and they got crapped on. But that was with St. Vicious and Cop, who, I mean, in that third and final game, both of those guys kind of gave up. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say it does push them.
Get ready, Twitter.
Yeah, get ready. Here comes the sass, everybody. I think Gravity does it.
Too.
Well, this is the thing I will say. I don't think that they do it in Worlds. I think that they're, as a team, they're very organized and they execute very well. But as individual players, I don't think they're going to be able to stack up. I think that it's one of the big things that North America has struggled with in the past is that like we either have really good players or really good team dynamic, and it's rare that we find both. Like when we look at Cloud9, like at some point Balls and High were like good, right? Like we were like, damn, these guys are great mid laner. That's a great top laner. This Sneaky's like an okay 80 carry, and then he got really good for a while. But now, like really, when we look objectively at Balls, like I don't even think he's one of the best top laners in the West. Maybe one of the best top laners in NA. But that was a team all about team synergy, and we look at like CLG. That was a team all about early game rotations and individual player strength, right? And Gravity, I think, has a lot of the same things where it's as a team like old Cloud9, they execute so well. They're coordinated. They know what they want to do. But as individual players, like name one international quality team that's going to drop any of their lanes to these guys. Like to even to Keen. Like, but Hanser, no way. They're gonna body Hanser. Like Bunny Fufu and God, I don't even know who their AD is. Like
I made myself sad. I made myself sad because the first top quality team that I said that would lose a lane would be AHQ, and now I'm sad.
Except Mountain will shit on them because Mountain is a god. Mountain is a god, Tom.
Oh boy, I feel
AHQ.
like this is a transition into international talk, and I still want to get through North America.
No, just in general. I'm just
yeah.
It's not going to international. Me and Tom love AHQ.
So Gravity, I mean, it's going to be. You're really going to have to watch all the TSM and Gravity games coming up because it's going to be those two teams battling for the top. What is interesting though is you kind of got four teams that even though there is a single point discrepancy between these four teams, I could really see it going either way. So you've got Dignitas on a downturn. If I could just get the words out. Still riding their kind of peak in the early and mid-season, sitting at 8-4. Tied at this point with Liquid, who definitely on the rise, 2-0 week this week, also at 8-4. You have CLG, who's on a very similar to Dignitas downturn, going 7-5. And then you've got Impulse on an upturn somewhat, going 7-5 as well. So it really kind of becomes the interesting question of how these teams are going to all sort of filter out. Dignitas is starting to show some major vulnerabilities and are starting to give up games left and right, but they still are kind of holding on at the bottom. Liquid's been really hot and cold. They are not
like running water.
CLG. CLG
is about to play the easiest week in the world, and I feel like they're going to get crushed just because it's the second half of the season.
I bet they're going to lose one of these games. To me, I will be dumbfounded if they lose them both. They have this week Enemy Esports, which I think they'll lose, and they have TDK, which for their souls, I hope they win. I mean, we even saw some really good solo play out of Double Lift this week, and they still just managed to throw it away every time. It's just unbelievable how this always happens. I don't even understand it.
Dude, why?
We started.
Play the music. Just play the music. We'll just sit here sad for 30 seconds.
Oh man, we get to talk about CLG. No, I think we should talk about CLG. Oh
no, just 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds of sadness. Tears from me, Mitch, and Chris. Soundtrack.
This sound is making me happy though. Like
So let's talk about Tip, who, to be honest,
CLG.
No. Each time you've played that now, this episode, there's been some sexual innuendo. It has to be a thing now.
It is a very sexy song. By the way, that song is provided by the Twitch Music Library. If you didn't know, and you're a streamer, there is a massive wealth of royalty-free music.
Massive?
What is that?
Massive? That is David Bowtie. The song is actually called Cloud 9,
nice.
Which couldn't make that shit up.
Cloud 9th place.
Yeah, pretty much. So Tip to me is a very interesting team because we saw this last split where all of a sudden they came out of nowhere and they're tearing shit up and they're making a run for playoffs. They're gonna do awesome. Holy shit, it's Tip of the world, and then Tip falls off just at the last moment. And this week, we just see amazing plays come out of Tip. And they win, if I'm not mistaken, both of their games. Of course, against CLG. Of course, against CLG. I will not cue the music again. And then also against Enemy. And Scumbag Zhaoi Zhao stealing Russia's pentakill on Italy.
The thing about... Well, okay, pentakills and everything are cool, but can we just talk about how not only did Tip beat CLG, and we're all talking about how it was horrendous CLG fashion to kind of throw away the second half of the season, let's talk about how they threw away the second half of the game here. 17-minute inhibitor, 5 kills up, multiple towers up, borderline 5th dragon buff, and... Let's fight Tip.
No.
Oh no.
Is it possible that they thought that they'd surrender? They thought it was solo queue and 17-minute inhibitor would mean, oh yeah, they're going to surrender at 20 minutes.
Okay.
And it wasn't even a clean inhibitor. It's not like the other team was down. They lost their top inhibitor tower for it as well. And they didn't lose the full inhibitor, but it was still a bit of a base race on that.
I thought the tower stayed alive.
If it stayed alive, it went down very shortly after. It was functionally losing it. I'm gonna pull up the game.
Oh my god!
You guys
All
keep
right.
talking.
This is a little CLG. You can't avoid it. It's like a drug. Like you have to talk about CLG. Music is not enough. And this is the thing. I said earlier that AD carry is a low impact role. I'm sticking to that. It is a low impact role. AD carry is a low impact role right now. All the major hyper carries are not very good, including Jinx. Jinx not amazing. Has a solid Sivir matchup. CLG has the option to first pick Sivir, the strongest game warping character in the game. Like, everything changes when you play in a game with Sivir, and they first pick Gragas. Here's the thing. First pick Gragas, maybe okay if you ban every other viable jungler. Rek'Sai, still on the table. The enemy team, they're going to take Nidalee. That's fine. Whatever. Nidalee's still pretty good, obviously, with the resurgence of the poke meta, but they prioritize Gragas for X-Smithy. For X-Smithy, they prioritize first pick. Not for this guy that you've been praising to us as this carry for this whole time.
They did
All
lose
right.
the tower.
Well,
it's just
sorry, I just see red when I'm thinking about
protect
CLG now.
the double lift comp. Are you kidding me, CLG? Are you kidding me? You're like, we can't run this ridiculously complicated map-wide pick comp. We can't run this pretty difficult to execute poke comp. Guess we'll just go back to protect the double lift. Whatever.
I don't
I don't know, man.
I
I think they can't late game shot call still. They got a really good early game, decent early game, and they can't shot call late game. They'll just every single loss is a whole. Let's see, one dies, and then we're like, hey, well, I'm gonna mosey over where you just died, and now I'm dead. And they're like, no, dude, I can say, oh no, I'm dead. And now it's like, oh hey, look, dude, 3 are down. Let's just push for the win. Like, it's just every game. I don't understand it. That they team fight so well up until like the 40-minute mark, and then they just all kind of just. You look at the bars. You're like, oh, there's a cooldown on Aphromu. He's dead.
So the thing I don't understand is not only did they kind of default to a little bit more of a AD carry centric composition in this one, and it did wind up working out for them for a large majority of the game, and they did push an early inhibitor because Jinx is a tower taking monster. However, looking at the individual lane matchups just through the pick and ban phase, they know there's a Runeglaive Ezreal on the other team, and they go with a Lulu lane. Now, Lulu, a bit of a bully when she was in top lane and playing against melee range tanky champions, but not necessarily as much of a bully when she's laning against someone that could stand 1,100 units away throwing Qs at the enemy minion wave. So, basically gives the mid lane, late game scaling, almost hyper carry, Luden's Echo, Runeglaive, AP Ezreal, a free farm lane. When in reality, you have Pobelter, the Zed player, not playing Zed against a champion that dies to Zed.
I don't think. See, here's the thing: is I don't necessarily think that Zed is the right pick. I just think that Pobelter, like, if even
pick
with
Ari!
the pick, and no, but even with the pick ban we have, like, okay, so yes, Lulu is lane bully. I think against everybody. I think obviously it's not as effective against Ezreal, but I still think Ezreal has to respect it, and as a result, you can play lane dominant. Where are the roams? Where is, like, the movement across the map to generate advantage? Where are the deep wards used to generate picks? When you have a team that's so strong and you've built an advantage so early on, why aren't you pushing for more? Why aren't you snowballing for more? Like, why are you giving Tip the opportunity to scale up? Why are you letting Tip get away with running mid lane Ezreal when it's very clear, and you've seen it executed before against other teams, that all you need to do is run over this, is not to not let him get the strength to scale up. And especially for CLG, the team that's like known for early game map movement and rotations, and that can't just be towers. Like, you have to be willing to go deep into their jungle to force picks, to get the vision you need, to create the small advantages. You can't just settle for towers. And if CLG want to play that style of game, they need to play it better. Because, yeah, it's cute that you can get a 5k gold lead in the first 20 minutes of the game, CLG, but if you can't team fight or fucking execute any time past those first 20 minutes, you're going to keep losing. So either shove it so hard down their throat that you can end the game in 25 minutes, or stop, or pick a new fucking strategy. It's so disappointing. CLG.
Yep.
So this is why we played the music.
No, it's just
Mommy,
like,
daddy, stop
it's
fighting.
just like it's like cocaine. CLG is cocaine. You're like, oh my god, I just want to talk about CLG. I just want to talk about CLG, and then you get that high, and then immediately afterwards, you're like, I feel like shit for the next 2 days. Oh my god, CLG. I'm just.
Yep. Especially watching it, you're like, cool. I get to talk about this. I get to talk about this game.
The thing is those first 5 minutes from CLG mechanically beautiful. Like, double lift gets the amazing rope-a-dope, almost double kill up in the top lane for first blood. He even style just lets the Gnar go and then lets Aphromu catch up and clean up the kill.
Yep.
Later on, they get the kills. And the thing I love the most, they're going to look like they're about to tower dive the Gnar who just teleported in. 1 minion left. Zion starts teleporting in. He did not teleport to start and initiate the dive. He teleported the 1 minion left that the tower had aggro on to safeguard the rest of his team to get them into position to take the tower and force Gnar away. It's like that shit is brilliant. Brilliant. And then you just fucking throw it away 10 minutes later.
So CLG is a bad H2K. Because I remember saying earlier on in the split, H2K have very clear level 1 plans. They have very clear early game shot calls. They have very clear early game rotations. And they don't even have to prioritize dragons. Very similar to what CLG does for the first 20 minutes of every single game. The only issue is H2K continues to play that aggressive and, like Sifa said, shoves it down the enemy's throats. CLG sits back and goes, farming for the next 15 minutes would be a really good idea right now.
It's like no matter you can't. You can put double lift on any team you want, but he's still just gonna do the same shit he does on every team he's ever played on.
I think that's the key. I think
bench him
for double lift and for CLG. Double lift needs to go into another team. If it can work for Forgiven, it can work for double lift.
Well, my theory is
TSM double
lift has good video editing skills, and he's just put together this sweet highlight montage of him outplaying people in competitive games. And whenever Hotshots comes up to him and he's like, "Well, double lift. We need to talk about your recent performance. It hasn't been very good." He just goes,
montage.
Do we? Boom.
He could just make a montage of those Jinx ults from the first 25 minutes of the game, and then nothing from the end.
The funny thing is I remember when remember when he was playing against Zion Spartan when Zion Spartan was on whatever team, I guess Coast at the time, and he outplays Zion Spartan on Riven, gets the 1v1 outplay as Twitch, and you hear the comms and Hotshot's like, "Why did you do that?" And he's like, "'Cause I can." I feel like that is just double lift in a nutshell. That it is just so bad. Because at the time I'm like, "Yeah, double lift," but now that I'm losing, I'm like, "Oh, yeah,
double lift,
makes sense. Yeah, 'cause he can." Well, there you go.
I mean, I think at this point, though, we're not talking about anything new. When does this not happen?
That's the thing. That's why I try to stay away, is because no matter what we do, if we talk about CLG, it's the same shit. It's like you can change out whatever you want, but it's just not going to... They're just going to do the same thing. Early game they're successful, or early season they're successful, late season they're not. Double lift does double lift things. The team always tries to pretend like they're better than they are.
So we started this conversation
about
just
tip.
talking about the tip.
I don't care about tip. I care about CLG. Oh,
Man,
sorry.
So this is why
derailing
we
an entire show.
This is why we don't talk about CLG.
I'm just gonna have to start AFKing for CLG section so I can just not say anything.
We kind of hit upon Liquid. I think next week Liquid's going to be a lot more relevant to talk about.
I think Liquid next week is going to show why they will be going to Worlds.
Oh shit! Big
words.
What do they need to get to Worlds, Mr. Tom?
I believe they have third place right now, which is 50 circuit points or championship points or whatever they are.
Or the circuit points, because I can't keep track.
So they would need to most likely. We're looking at Team Liquid being the team that goes through the gauntlet, but we're also looking at them at being the raid boss of the gauntlet. Because if they are able to repeat a third place performance or get to the third, fourth place match, which if history shows us is what happens to Team Liquid / Curse, then they should probably wind up they would get 70 championship points from a third place finish, which would then catapult them to 120. They'd basically be in H2K's position. Only the big factor is if Gravity beats TSM or not, if we're assuming Gravity is the other team that looks like they're going to be going to the finals this split. So it's going to be either Liquid or Gravity, or Liquid or whoever gets second place, or would probably wind up being the team with the most points that auto-qualifies for Worlds if we assume TSM wins the split. So Liquid's in a very good spot at either being an auto-qualifier if they can make it to third place again, or the finals, or being the last team to play in the gauntlet.
I think Liquid's only thing that holds them back is Phoenix in the mid lane. I think Phoenix has been very mediocre, and I think we obviously have this great highlight Azir game, and I think from the interviews that we heard this week, that's obviously kind of pushed him, because now he's like, oh, this feels good. I want to be the playmaker. I want to be that guy, and I think that's kind of reignited the fire in him. Yeah, to become a top tier mid laner. But I've seen that guy get shit on in mid so many times that it's hard for me to imagine Liquid really doing well in playoffs, especially when a lot of the top teams have good mid laners. And if he goes to Worlds, obviously that'll be a bigger issue too when there's just so much star talent in the mid lane. That said, right now he looks pretty weak, but like I said, that spark I feel like has been ignited. I feel like after that Azir game, he's like, shit, I want to win. I want to be better. And I think Dom or someone said in an interview that like he wants to do that again. He wants to experience that again and wants to keep going. So if he can step it up and perform better in the laning phase specifically, because I think he's been solid in team fights, just the laning phase that suffers, then yeah, I'd agree. I think they're well deserving of a top spot. They've been really solid this season.
He's got a decent test in the mid lane though next week, because he goes up against TDK, which Liquid should win that matchup, but judging by individual performance, it might be a difficult lane for him against Ninja.
At least early on.
Yeah.
Against Emperor, you mean?
No.
Phoenix?
Ninja
in the mid lane.
Oh, I've been messing
Emperor
that
is
up.
the AD carry.
I think I've been messing that up this entire episode.
A little bit, but that's okay. You're getting used to the Emperor's new groove, so we'll let it slide.
Oh.
And then they go up against TSM on day 2, which is definitely like a match of the week kind of match. And I think this is really going to judge either A, where TSM's at with their own kind of internal situation and adapting to a more poke-centric metagame, and how good is Team Liquid. Like, if Team Liquid loses this game to TSM, then maybe they aren't a team that can go to Worlds from NA. But if they show up and they can beat TSM, then I'm definitely aboard the Team Liquid hype train to Worlds. So, like, I think that's like a big make-or-break match for them.
Well, and I will say this. I think in the TDK matchup, I do think that I don't know if Ninja's the better mid laner. Well, actually, I'm pretty sure that Ninja's the better mid laner in just about every aspect. But I will say that I think, the difference in the junglers is also massive. I think TDK for Kez is just like, I don't know why that guy's still on the team, honestly. So I think for the TSM matchup, though, it really will be a real test. I think the TDK matchup, I think we'll have to watch the junglers and see how much the junglers influence the mid lane matchup to start it off. But I definitely think that, yeah, if Phoenix can go even with Bjergsen in lane, or even fall behind a little bit in CS, but like have relatively similar impact, just like a small deficit, I will be actually pretty impressed.
Well, they're challenged a little bit each week. Week 8 for them is probably going to be their easiest week because they have CLG, and if it's the modern CLG, then it won't be a problem in enemy esports. And then in their final week, they're going up against Teammate, which should be a pretty easy cakewalk. But then the very last game of the summer split is Liquid versus Impulse, which, depending on how Tip performs in these next couple of weeks, might make it a pretty interesting match.
It could be like a second place, like a team who gets a bye in playoffs kind of match.
Yeah, because right now Liquid has never been able to beat Gravity. And I think all of their matchups ever, now that I think of it. And they've lost their first of the matchup against TSM. So it'll be interesting. I mean, there's definitely be some marked improvements from Liquid going into this week. They had a really great week last week. They're going to have, hopefully, a leg up from their first game in week 7. And maybe they can pull something off against TSM. That'd be critically bad for TSM, amazing for Gravity, because at that point, that's just a win that TSM needs to have if they want to get the number 1 seed.
That's going to be fun because we'll have the Mott going up against the anti-Mott in that matchup day too.
Yes, we will. Any final thoughts? I mean, we can talk about how Cloud9 has kind of collapsed and broken, and it's really sad. But I feel like it's the CLG conversation, just without the anger. It's just more the sadness. It's same amount of passion, but just sadness.
I didn't get a chance to watch their game against Teammate, mainly because it wasn't an important match for me on my radar of games I wanted to watch this week. But their first 30 minutes against Liquid looked really good. And then, so here's the thing. I watched the game against Liquid, and Cloud9 for the first 20 minutes played a solid laning, rotational, tower diving, strategic game that looked like High was like the missing piece all along. And then they started doing weird stuff. And by weird stuff, I mean the kind of stuff they did when they were at Worlds against Samsung Blue and knew they couldn't win the Best of X series, where they started doing weird suicide missions for inhibitor towers and weird split pushes to try to get advantages in lanes. They were sacrificing people when they had a gold lead to try to get things like a top lane inhibitor or a top lane inhibitor tower, and they didn't need to do that. They may not have had a superior team fight. They may have had to worry about the ability of Gragas, Nautilus, and Yasuo to kind of wombo combo everybody down, but they showed that through dominating the early game, they had gold advantages that could have, in Sifa's words, shoved down Team Liquid's throat, that they just chose not to. And it looked like that they always thought they were playing from behind in this game. And I think that's the biggest thing about Cloud9 is they're not utilizing their carries as carries. Sneaky might not look as good as he did last split, but he's still a solid AD carry. And the big hype about Incarnation was this guy is a dominant force in and out of lane. He can solo carry a top tier EU West solo queue game. So why can't he put on a very similar performance for what was a top seeded NA LCS team? They're not letting their carries carry, and it seemed like they were always thinking they were behind. And I mean, part of the reason they were behind is because Balls picked Fizz, and I don't like Balls as Fizz whatsoever. But part of the reason, too, is it looked like they were trying to trade lives for objectives when they had a gold lead and didn't have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw that Meteos was stepping down and High was coming back, I thought this was Meteos essentially just cracking under the pressure of him having to do the full-time shot caller, not making the grade, and then taking a big step back, and High coming back in to really get this team going more than they have been. But seeing the teammate game, it kind of looked like there was a parent in the room and they were telling the children what to do, but the children were just going around doing whatever the fuck they wanted because Incarnation was doing stupid plays and got caught out a bunch. I think Balls did some questionable plays as well.
About 7 of them, because that's how many deaths he has.
The thing that made this game sadder than it was is that it was teammate and it wasn't a team that could take advantage of all these C9 mistakes, and it ended up being a lot longer than it needed to.
For me, between CLG and Cloud9 is like CLG keep promising us new things, and Cloud9 are like, please, we're just trying to figure it out. Like CLG's like, yeah, we're winning the early season.
Please make it stop.
And then Cloud9's like, guys, we're sorry. Like we're just trying to make it work. And I'm just like, Cloud9, I love you, please, just come back, just be good again.
I think we're gonna see Cloud9 go away.
No,
I think the Cloud9 as we know it is gonna go away. The players. The problem is that
if Sneaky goes to CLG, I'll believe again.
These players are just stepping out. Like Meteos, High, they both took a step back from their positions, but didn't put themselves up to go to different teams. Didn't talk about wanting to go other teams.
Well, High retired, and then he was brought back because they have no other.
But he was kept on Cloud9 management. That's the thing.
Wait, he retired from professional play to.
I'm just saying,
a CFO or whatever?
These colors don't run, and Cloud9 clearly has to make a change in order to get anything back to make themselves relevant. And I feel like players are just not going to be motivated to play. If you're Lemonation and Sneaky, for instance, what's your motivation to keep going?
Your motivation to keep going, I believe, is the fact that you were really good before, and it's not your fault. I think your motivation is eventually your management's going to realize your solo lanes need work.
I think they're so tight, and the organization had such a high run that they're all too buddy to take a step back and say, this is the person that's doing this. This is our problem. Here we are. We're going to actually objectively fix this. I think Cloud9 is something that's too broken to be fixed. And even I was hoping maybe out of the season that just the switch out from High would be enough to be like, whoa, High is gone. We need to step up. But now seeing Meteos being willing to leave kind of says, hey guys, I'm not taking this responsibility anymore.
I kind of see two different thought processes in that analysis, though, because you said that the Cloud9 we know of now is going to go away. So
yes.
So what you're saying is that by the Cloud9 that we know is going away, either they're A, going to get relegated, which it doesn't sound like you're talking about, or B,
players.
They're
Specifically
going
talking
to
about
lose
players.
Sneaky, Lemonation, and Balls.
Either through roster swaps or trades. I think they're going to be bringing in new talent.
See,
that's fair.
that I don't disagree with, and I think that to an extent they need new talent. However,
Absolutely.
I think that the issue is that when Hai left, Hai retired, and he stepped away from the game, and everybody assumed that, like, oh, okay, well, we're going to bring in somebody else, we'll all mesh, things will be great, yada, yada, yada. And I don't think Incarnation fits. And I don't think Balls is good anymore.
I think Balls is okay. I don't think he's amazing. I think they jumped on the Incarnation hype train when there was no reason. Incarnation didn't, like, everyone was like, oh, let's get Incarnation. You know, there was a lot of, like, and people were wondering who was the first team to pick him up. And it's like, why not pick up an established mid laner? Like, why not pick up someone who has a good track record and a solid track record? And I feel like they made the gamble of swapping out Hai for someone new. Well, I guess Hai retired, so they had to pick a new one. It's just they made it a bigger gamble than it needed to be. And who knows, a year from now, it could turn out to be the best decision ever. But right now, it's screwing them.
And I mean, it kind of stinks because it's halfway through the split, and if they wind up getting, you know, they could be looking at not going to Worlds after taking second place in last split, which is deeply concerning. Like, especially for, like you said, a lot of the players on the roster that are like, well, we were so good before, like, what happened? And it's a little bit difficult to see, like, a team go through a rebuilding process that's taking this long, and then see that, like, their previous work is just going to get erased from before, because that's just even more of a devastating blow. The one thing I just don't necessarily realize is, like, why Cloud9 didn't look to other organizations that have done this, put their faith in a name of solo queue that hasn't really panned out, and take consideration for that. And I think the biggest thing to look at is Roccat, because, like, in the same vein, it was Incarnation and Nukeduck were the top two US solo queue players. Both of them have not panned out in competitive play. Nukeduck did a little bit in summer of Season 3, but then he was banned for a year. He fell off, only played solo queue, and has been mediocre at best. Like, mediocre at best isn't going to cut it when your opposition is Keen and Bjergsen.
It's a different feel. To me, it's a different team now, and there's not a lot of hope for Cloud9 fans.
I mean, it might be if they could put the carry pants back on Incarnation and work it out that way, with a poke mid lane centric era kind of being ushered in by Runeglaive and Varus and Jace and Pokey Wonderland and that kind of stuff. Like, maybe, but it hasn't happened yet, and they've tried it and it hasn't worked yet. So I'm not high hopes.
I'm gonna be really sad if the words that I have to speak from my mouth is Coast takes Cloud9's LCS spot.
No,
It's not Mott's mouth that we're scared of. It's when his anus speaks. You truly must listen.
Speaking of talking out of my anus, we're gonna move on to a little surprise section to lighten the mood. I have developed a game that we will play from time to time when news is slow, because I looked at this episode and I said there's no way we're gonna rock this out in an hour and a half.
And then we mentioned CLG.
But then we mentioned CLG, and we talked about pretty much every team in every region except for Enemy, which is ironic because we usually talk about Enemy as much as we can. So on we go. Mitch is crying at the moment. It's great. Name that play. So what I have cooked up for you guys here is a wonderful little game.
Wait, hold on. I want to be clear here. Did you literally just go name that play? Like, you didn't even like chop your own vocal sample up?
I tried for a really long time.
Really?
And I was like, wait a second.
Is a really long time, like a minute?
This is going to take 3 seconds to just do with my voice. So let me do that.
So stop having days off of work.
What I have done...
Whoever let you have one of those is crazy.
What I have done is I have taken 2 big plays from this week, and I have censored out all of the names and team identifiers. You our board of contestants here have to guess which one's which. So let's get to the first matchup. Does everybody understand the rules?
No.
I can't wait.
By the way, this is first
you
of
take
all
a play that's shoutcasted over, but cut out the team names, and we have to fill in the blanks.
yes. This is either going to be none of you guys wanting to answer, or you guys getting this in 2 seconds, and a good part of my day ruined. So let's just get
Let's
right
hope for the
into
latter.
Or kill the turret. So now we might see a bit of a shove. And that damage is starting to come through.
Oh boy. Don't stand there. Oh, Flash is out. Oh, the Chaos Storm goes down. And gets baited in to
Which
the
one
tire.
is cursing?
Oh, the next one's
It
even
does
better.
sound like it. It does sound like cursing.
Do we have
It's
to,
a
do we have to
Victor
talk
game.
about okay, I'm going to guess TDK versus TSM, and I'm going to guess that's the specific instance where Bjergsen... Does Bjergsen try to ult and then Ninja flashes to the side?
I second that.
Yeah! I remember that play.
Suck
Nailed
my-
it.
Someone giffied that play and sent it to me, and like, is Ninja the new best mid laner? And I'm like, did he win?
He had, well, right, but he had so much footwork on Victor, and it's just absolutely incredible. I want to see him play Ezreal. Hopefully, we'll see it next week. Okay, here is clip number 2, and I did one from North America, one from Europe.
Oh shit.
It is a chance, like, Pokecoms really want the Baron, but at the same time, they don't want to be caught inside the Baron because they need to be able to kite. We will get the fight, though.
Have started this one. Look at he's already used True Shot Barrage, but doesn't get a kill. Is going low. The Ren's not going to be enough to secure it. Monsoon to scrum to mess up the fight. Throws down Emperor's Divide. He manages to get. I reset myself. Gonna dash towards the right. Will not go quietly into the night. They will continue to fight, and they will take down. Rune Glaive means nothing. Turn to Baron. 3 for 1, and they should get this.
Never managed to group together here and start poking.
I am going to use
I mean,
my
come on,
expert
Rune
EU
Glaive
knowledge.
means nothing. Can you please make it?
I'm going to use my expert EU knowledge and nothing else that was a dead giveaway in that one to say that this is the Giants versus Fnatic matchup from day number 1.
Yeah,
would
you
agree.
nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, who else has beaten Rune Glaive Ezreal?
Who else has played Runegave Ezreal in EU besides Giants?
So we won't pull this out every week because it does take a lot of time to find. For some reason, European casters, first of all, talk way faster. Second of all, do not say ever champion names. They will always go with a player. And I think that's just a little bit more on the professionalism side. They're a little bit better at it. I love the NA casters. I actually like them better than the European casters. But it was so hard to find something that wasn't just bleeps every 3 seconds, and actually ended up being something a little more interesting. So
Yeah, but
just
that-
a little fun.
It also sounds like somebody took that clip of Deficio saying "Kiss me, Trevor" a little bit too far with all those bleeps.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually hilarious. I love it. So we won't pull
I
that out.
enjoyed that,
every week.
actually.
That was a
Yeah.
lot more fun than I thought it was going to be, and the background music during the shot calls, like from the casters, was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, I'll give a.
That was the thing when we got into the EU one and I could hear it.
I was like, well, it makes sense. It's a Giants game now.
Yeah. So let's round off this episode because it is quite late and I'm getting some unhappy faces.
I can't even
Let's.
see mine.
Yeah, I know.
We're
I
all
can't hear it,
dead
though.
tired, except for
so tired.
I'm not. I've got to work at 6 a.m. and I'm lively as ever. I'm sweating.
You spent all day doing that.
I'm wet right now. I've been wet for forever. The lights are off right now because
beep, 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 beep.
yeah, it's a super long story. I'm just going to talk about fantasy and how I beat Sifa this week.
Fun
Why did,
fact, when Wild Turtle doesn't play the game, it's hard for him to get points.
why did I win Sifa? Because
I
Wild Turtle.
forgot. Wild Turtle.
Yeah.
Wild Turtle giveth and Wild Turtle taketh away, folks.
Who was your backup, just out of curiosity? Who'd you have picked?
I probably would have taken Core JJ, because I did swap him for Core JJ for like 30 seconds, but then,
Okay. Good,
So,
because
I think you would have won either way, honestly.
Oh, really? How many?
Yeah, I
what was that differential?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, it was a lot.
Big. It was like 40
Yeah.
points, yeah.
Because
It
I
was
was
not a
thinking,
good. It was not a good week for a lot of my players. Yeah, I also wanted to swap out Pobelter for for someone else, and definitely should have. It was a rough week.
Yeah. I was thinking I should take the higher ground and just let you know that you were running Wild Turtle, but then I thought, no, I want to win.
Oh no, I've been a big old bastard about this whole thing. Yeah, that's fair.
Ironically, though, CLG got more points than Dignitas did. And I think, did Dignitas lose both of their games? I don't remember. That was a while ago.
It was Dignitas.
That was
no
an hour and a half
cares.
ago in this episode.
We didn't even really
Right.
talk about Dignitas.
Good.
No,
Come on,
actually,
Cereal Box won.
Yeah,
I won a
Mitch,
game.
Come on, let's hear it.
That's what you get for starting Keith for a game and then having him still be on your starting lineup for when he doesn't play a game. You still win. Don't do drugs.
Piglet was the number one point scorer that week, so you dodged a bullet there. He put up 62 points. Kyle was running him.
Yeah, he still couldn't save Kyle's team.
And then Chris beat Optimus Tom.
You know, I knew I was in for a bad time when Kasing and Betsy were my highest point scorers on
Yeah,
my
that
team.
was,
Oh,
that was
God.
some weird. That was some weird plays, dude.
Yeah.
Betsy did really well this week.
Yeah. I
don't know
thought
how
he was
did.
going to do well enough, but then Ryu beat him by 11.5 points.
Remember week one where we're like, oh man, he has more Origin players. He's gonna win for sure. And they were like scoring 60 points apiece. Those were the days.
Yeah, Amazing put up 27 points, the lowest besides TSM as a team on my roster. And I have Steve.
Yeah. So the current standings sit with Dan and I dead tied at 1-1 in the matchup and 4-2 in score. Then it goes down to Kyle and Chris. I don't know what the matchup is there. And then Optimus Tom and Box tied at the bottom.
Whoa.
Flipping tables down here.
Yeah, at least you're not alone, Mitch. That's all I can hope
It's
for.
so lovely having some company here.
Yeah. Well, from everybody at the T-Force Network, I'm going to not let this show go on any longer than it has because I think I'll have a little mini revolt, at least from the East Coast people. So thank you for watching the show. We absolutely love that you do. If you're in Twitch land, be sure to download the podcast and listen to my Challenger Rundown, which airs for you podcast people very soon after my words stop. And you can learn all about what's going on in that scene and figure out who's going to be replacing TDK in the Copenhagen Walls. It's going to be hot. Check it out.